Let me start with the truth. Most people don't want to hear. Excuses don't protect you, they poison you. The moment you make an excuse, you hand over your power. You don't lose because life is unfair, you lose because you negotiated with your comfort. And comfort always lies. If excuses paid dividends, everyone would be successful. But they don't. They just keep you exactly where you are, stuck, broke, tired, and confused. Here's the hook you need to hear today. The same mouth that creates excuses could be creating results. Think about that. Every excuse you repeat becomes a belief, and every belief becomes a behavior. When you say, I don't have time, what you're really saying is, it's not a priority. When you say, I'm not ready, what you're really saying is, I'm afraid to grow. Excuses are not facts, they are stories. Weak habits tell strong potential to stay asleep. Let me be clear. Successful people don't have fewer problems, they have fewer excuses. They understand that results don't come from motivation, they come from decisions. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your discipline. And discipline begins the moment you stop explaining why you can't and start executing what you must. Excuses feel good today, but they charge interest tomorrow. Here's another truth that might shake you. Your future is listening to the language you're using today. Every excuse delays your destiny. Every justification robs your bank account, your body, your relationships, and your purpose. Lazy lies sound intelligent when you repeat them long enough, but reality always collects the receipt. You cannot lie your way into success. You can only work your way there. If you want a different life, you must adopt a different standard. Stop asking what's the easiest way and start asking what's required. Winners don't wait for perfect conditions. They move with imperfect courage. They understand that action creates clarity, not the other way around. The moment you take responsibility, your excuses lose their voice and your results find one. The moment an excuse leaves your mouth, something far more valuable leaves your hands, your power. Power is the ability to influence outcomes, and excuses quietly remove that ability while making you feel justified. That's the danger. Excuses don't announce themselves as weakness. They disguise themselves as logic, timing, or responsibility. They sound reasonable, even intelligent. But behind every excuse is a decision to give control to circumstances instead of claiming it for yourself. And once power is surrendered, results are never far behind. Here's a hard hook to sit with. You don't lose progress first, you lose ownership first. Results are always the last thing to disappear. Before the bank account shrinks, before the opportunity passes, before the dream fades, the excuse shows up and says, it's not your fault. That sentence feels comforting, but comfort is expensive. When you accept that it's not your fault, you also accept that it's not in your control. And if it's not in your control, there's nothing left to do but wait. Waiting is how power quietly dies. Excuses train your mind to outsource responsibility. Instead of asking, what can I do? You start asking, why can't I? That shift is subtle, but it's deadly. A person who constantly explains their limitations eventually becomes limited by their explanations. The mind believes whatever you repeat consistently, and excuses are repetitions of helplessness. Over time, they lower your personal standard without you even noticing. You don't quit outright, you settle. You don't fail loudly, you drift. And drifting feels harmless until you look up one day and realize years have passed with nothing to show for your potential. Another hook you need to hear clearly is this: power doesn't disappear, it just changes hands. When you give power to an excuse, you hand it to time, fear, other people's opinions, or past experiences. You let external factors dictate internal decisions. That's how capable people end up living small lives. Not because they lack ability, but because they surrendered authority over their own actions. The most dangerous person in the room is not the one with excuses. It's the one who believes their excuses are facts. Ownership, on the other hand, is uncomfortable because it removes all hiding places. When you take responsibility, you can no longer blame the economy, your background, your age, or your situation. But that discomfort is actually freedom in disguise. The moment you say, this is on me, you regain power. You may not control everything that happens, but you always control what you do next. That's where momentum lives. Power grows when responsibility is accepted, not when conditions are perfect. Excuses also drain confidence long before they drain results. Every time you excuse inaction, you send a message to yourself that you can't be trusted to follow through. Confidence is built through self-integrity, doing what you said you would do, especially when it's difficult. Excuses break that integrity. Over time, you stop believing in your own promises, and when belief is gone, execution becomes heavy. That's why people feel tired before they even start. It's not physical fatigue, it's mental betrayal. If you want to measure where your power is right now, listen to your language. Power sounds like ownership. Weakness sounds like explanation. Strong people don't waste energy defending why they didn't act. They invest energy deciding how they will act next. The shift is immediate. and practical. The moment excuses are removed, clarity shows up. Options appear. Solutions become visible. Not because the world changed, but because power returned to its rightful place, your hands. The truth is simple but uncomfortable. Excuses don't just delay success, they redefine identity. You stop seeing yourself as a creator of outcomes and start seeing yourself as a reactor to life. And once that identity settles in, results don't stand a chance. Taking back power starts with refusing to explain and choosing to execute, even imperfectly. Power grows in motion, not in justification. Every excuse begins with a whisper from comfort. It doesn't shout, it soothes. It tells you to slow down, wait a little longer, protect yourself from discomfort. And the dangerous part is that it sounds reasonable. Comfort never tells you it's trying to keep you small, it tells you it's trying to keep you safe. But here's the hook you need to recognize early. Comfort is not your friend. It's your most persuasive liar. It negotiates with your future using fear dressed up as logic. Potential is loud at the beginning of your journey. It shows up as ideas, ambition, restlessness, and vision. Comfort responds by offering excuses that quiet that noise. You've already done enough, now isn't the right time, you deserve a break. None of those statements are evil on their own, but when they become a pattern, they become a prison. Comfort doesn't want you to fail, it wants you to stay familiar. Growth threatens comfort because growth demands change, and change demands effort. So comfort lies, not maliciously, but persistently. Here's a truth that separates high performers from everyone else. The lie isn't that you can't do it. The lie is that you shouldn't try yet. Comfort convinces potential to wait until conditions are perfect. Confidence is complete and fear is gone. But perfect conditions never arrive. Confidence is built in action, not in preparation. Fear doesn't disappear before the move. It dissolves during the move. Comfort knows this, so it delays you with excuses that feel responsible but are actually protective shields for fear. Excuses are comfort's favorite tool because they don't feel like quitting. They feel like postponing. And postponing feels harmless, but every delay compounds. The opportunity you didn't take doesn't stay waiting. It moves on to someone less prepared but more willing. Comfort then steps in again and says, see, it wasn't meant for you. Another lie. It was meant for the version of you that was willing to be uncomfortable. Another hook worth sitting with is this. Comfort feeds on unused potential. The more potential you have, the stronger the excuses become. That's why capable people struggle more with procrastination than incapable ones. They can see the weight of what's possible, and comfort rushes in to protect them from the pressure of becoming. Excuses soften the demand that potential places on you. They allow you to feel intelligent without being effective. Comfort also reframes fear as wisdom. It tells you you're being cautious, strategic, or realistic. But realism without courage becomes self-sabotage. Growth always feels unrealistic before it becomes normal. Every new level of success requires a version of you that doesn't yet exist. Comfort lies by convincing you that staying the same is safer than becoming someone new. In reality, stagnation is far more dangerous than failure because failure teaches. While stagnation erodes, the most subtle damage excuses cause is internal. Every time you obey comfort instead of acting on potential, you weaken your trust in yourself. You start to doubt whether you are the kind of person who follows through. Potential thrives on belief, and belief is strengthened by evidence. Action provides that evidence. Excuses remove it. Over time, comfort doesn't just lie to your potential, it silences it. The ideas stop coming. The urgency fades, the fire cools, not because the potential is gone, but because it learned it wouldn't be honored. Pay attention to this. Comfort always speaks in the present. Potential always speaks in the future. Comfort asks how you feel right now. Potential asks who you want to become. When you choose comfort, you trade long-term fulfillment for short-term relief. That trade never works in your favor. The discomfort of discipline is temporary, but the discomfort of regret is permanent. Breaking free begins with awareness. The moment you recognize an excuse as comfort speaking, you regain choice. You don't need to eliminate fear. You need to stop obeying it. Potential doesn't require perfection, certainty, or readiness. It requires movement. The smallest action in the direction of growth weakens comfort's influence and strengthens your identity as someone who acts despite discomfort. That identity is where real momentum begins. Most people believe motivation is the engine of success, but that belief is exactly what keeps them stuck. Motivation is emotional, and emotions are unstable. They rise when things feel exciting and disappear when things feel difficult. If your progress depends on how you feel, your results will always be inconsistent. Here's the hook that challenges everything you've been taught. Motivation is unreliable, but decisions are unbreakable. Successful people don't wait to feel like acting. They act because they decided a decision is different from a preference. Preferences change with mood, energy, and environment. Decisions create boundaries. When you decide, you remove debate. There is no negotiation with yourself, no internal argument about whether today is the day. The moment a decision is made, action becomes the natural next step. That's why high achievers appear disciplined. They've simply eliminated daily decision fatigue by deciding once and executing repeatedly. Motivation asks, do I feel ready? Decisions ask, what did I commit to? That difference changes everything. Feelings want comfort, decisions demand alignment. When you rely on motivation, you give your emotions authority over your actions. When you rely on decisions, you give your values authority instead. Values don't wake up tired. Values don't care about mood. Values hold the line when enthusiasm fades, and that's where real progress is built. Here's another hook worth. Remembering, discipline is not willpower. It's a system of decisions already made. People think disciplined individuals are stronger mentally, but in reality, they've reduced the need for strength. They don't decide whether to show up each day, they decided who they are. Identity follows decisions. When you decide, I am the kind of person who does this, behavior follows naturally. The struggle disappears because the argument no longer exists. Motivation can inspire a start, but it cannot sustain a process. Decisions sustain momentum. That's why so many people begin strong and fade quickly. They were emotionally driven, not decision driven. Emotion gets you excited, decision gets you consistent. Consistency doesn't feel glamorous, but it compounds faster than intensity ever will. Small actions done daily outperform big actions done occasionally, and decisions make small actions non-negotiable. Another truth that separates achievers from dreamers is this: you don't need more motivation, you need fewer options. Options create hesitation. Hesitation drains energy. When everything is optional, nothing gets done. A decision closes doors. It removes alternatives. It forces alignment between intention and action. That's why commitment feels heavy at first. It removes escape routes, but that weight is what builds strength. Decisions also create self-trust. Every time you follow through on a decision, you reinforce the belief that you can rely on yourself. Confidence isn't built by hype. It's built by keeping promises to yourself. Motivation may feel good in the moment, but it doesn't create evidence. Action does. And action flows naturally from decisions that have already been made. When challenges arise, and they always do, motivation will ask for a break, an excuse, or a delay. Decisions respond differently. Decisions say, this is what I do regardless. That mindset transforms obstacles into inconveniences instead of stopping points. You stop asking whether something is hard and start asking whether it's necessary. Necessary actions get done regardless of emotion. There is a reason results change permanently when decisions change. Motivation fades, circumstances shift, and feelings fluctuate, but a true decision restructures behavior. It changes how you allocate time, energy, and focus. It removes the daily battle and replaces it with forward motion. Once you understand that success is decision-driven, not emotion-driven, you stop chasing motivation and start building outcomes that last. Most people underestimate the power of their words because they treat language as expression rather than instruction. But every word you speak repeatedly is a command issued to your subconscious. Your mind does not argue with what you tell it consistently. It organizes your behavior to match it. Here's the hook most people miss. You are always speaking your future into existence, even when you think you're just talking. The question is whether your words are building it or quietly tearing it down. Language is not neutral. It either reinforces possibility or it reinforces limitation. When you say, I'm not good at this, your mind doesn't hear humility. It hears direction. It immediately begins searching for evidence to support that statement. You don't consciously sabotage yourself. Your language does it automatically. Over time, the phrases you repeat become mental defaults, and those defaults shape how you respond to opportunities, challenges, and pressure. Pay attention to how quickly language becomes identity. Saying, I can't often enough turns into I don't. I don't eventually becomes that's just not me. This is how potential is slowly boxed in by vocabulary. Another powerful hook to remember is this: your life will never rise above the level of the conversations you have with yourself. External conversations matter, but internal language decides everything. What you whisper to yourself when no one is listening becomes the louds. Voice in your life. Words also shape perception. Two people can face the same obstacle and experience completely different realities based on the language they use to describe it. One calls it a problem, the other calls it a process. One says it's stressful, the other says it's stretching. The situation is the same, but the outcome will be different because language determines emotional response, and emotional response determines behavior. Change the words, and you change the experience. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Your excuses survive because your language protects them. Phrases like, I'm trying, I'll see, or maybe later sound harmless, but they keep commitment at a distance. They create psychological exits before effort even begins. Strong language removes escape routes. When you say I will instead of I'll try, your brain shifts from possibility to execution. The body follows the command. Language also programs expectations. If you constantly describe your life as hard, exhausting, or overwhelming, your mind prepares you for struggle. It scans for confirmation. Difficulty becomes familiar, and familiarity feels safe, even when it's painful. That's why some people unknowingly resist progress. It would require a new language and a new identity. Growth demands a vocabulary that supports expansion. Another hook we're sitting with is this: your words become your standards before they become your results. When you tolerate negative self-talk, you lower your internal standards. Lower standards produce lower effort, and lower effort produces predictable outcomes. High performers are not delusional, they are deliberate with language. They don't deny reality, but they describe it in a way that keeps them in motion. They speak in terms of solutions, learning, and progress, even when the situation is difficult. The most powerful shift happens when language aligns with responsibility. Instead of saying, "This is happening to me," you say, "This is something I'm handling." That single shift restores authority. Language that places you at the center of action strengthens confidence and clarity. You stop reacting and start directing. Your future responds accordingly. Every day, through casual phrases and unconscious habits, you are writing instructions for the life you will live. Those instructions accumulate, they shape your confidence, your resilience, and your willingness to act. When your language changes, your choices change. When your choices change, your future has no option but to change with them. Most people don't fail because they choose the wrong goals. They fail because they choose convenience over commitment. Convenience feels harmless because it's easy, familiar, and immediately rewarding. But here's the hook that separates average lives from extraordinary ones. Convenience is the silent enemy of greatness. It never forces you to quit. It simply persuades you to do less than what's required. What's required is rarely comfortable. It demands early mornings when sleep feels better, focused work when distraction feels easier, and persistence when quitting would feel like relief. Convenience asks, what feels good right now? Commitment asks, what moves me forward? The difference between those two questions is the difference between progress and stagnation. People who achieve uncommon results are not more talented, they are more willing to do what others avoid. Convenience rewards you immediately, but it charges a long-term price. Commitment costs you up front, but it pays compound interest. That trade-off shows up everywhere. Skipping discipline today feels small, but repeated often, it shapes identity. You don't suddenly become undisciplined. You practice convenience until discipline feels foreign. Another hook worth absorbing is this: what you practice daily becomes who you are permanently. Successful people understand that ease is not a signal of correctness. Just because something is easy doesn't mean. And it's effective. In fact, the most effective actions often feel uncomfortable at first because they stretch capacity. Growth always feels awkward before it feels normal. Convenience lies by telling you that struggle means something is wrong, when in reality, struggle often means something is working. Commitment removes emotional negotiation. When something is required, mood becomes irrelevant. You don't ask how you feel about brushing your teeth, you do it because it's required. High performers treat key behaviors the same way. They don't wait to feel inspired to work, train, learn, or improve. They've already decided that. These actions are non-negotiable. That decision is what frees them from inconsistency. Here's another hook that hits hard. Average people optimize for comfort. Successful people optimize for results. Comfort avoids friction. Results demand friction. The gym is uncomfortable before it's empowering. Discipline feels restrictive before it feels freeing. Convenience keeps life predictable, but commitment makes it meaningful. Meaning is found in effort, not ease. Convenience also shortens perspective. It focuses on now. Commitment expands perspective. It focuses on who you are becoming. When you choose convenience, you protect your current comfort at the expense of future opportunity. When you choose commitment, you temporarily disrupt comfort to create long-term stability. That's why discipline feels heavy in the beginning. It's building a future you can't see yet. What's required is often simple, but it's rarely easy. Simple doesn't mean convenient. Reading daily is simple. Training consistently is simple. Showing up on time is simple. But simplicity doesn't remove resistance. Commitment is the ability to do simple things consistently despite resistance. That ability compounds into skill, confidence, and credibility over time. Convenience loves shortcuts. Commitment respects process. Shortcuts feel efficient, but they skip the growth that makes results sustainable. When success arrives without process, it collapses under pressure. Commitment builds foundations strong enough to carry success without breaking identity. That's why people who earn their results can keep them, and people who stumble into them often lose them. Every moment presents a choice between what's convenient and what's required. That choice may seem small, but it's never insignificant. Each time you choose what's required, you strengthen discipline. Each time you choose convenience, you weaken it. Discipline is not built in dramatic moments. It's built in ordinary decisions repeated daily. The people you admire didn't wake up extraordinary. They practiced commitment when convenience was available. They understood that ease is seductive, but but effort is transformative. Over time, what once felt hard becomes habit, and what once felt uncomfortable becomes empowering. That transformation begins the moment convenience stops being the deciding factor and requirement takes its place. Execution is what shows up when excuses leave the room. As long as excuses are present, action hesitates. It analyzes, delays, and negotiates. But the moment excuses are removed, something powerful happens. Movement begins. Here's the hook that shifts everything. Clarity doesn't create execution. Execution creates clarity. Waiting to feel ready is just another excuse wearing a different outfit. Excuses create noise. They flood the mind with options, doubts, and explanations. That noise makes simple actions feel complicated. When excuses are eliminated, the mind becomes quiet, and in that quiet, priorities become obvious. You stop asking what you should do and start doing what you already know. Most people are not confused about what to do. They are distracted by reasons not to do it. Execution thrives on simplicity. It doesn't need perfect plans, complete confidence, or guaranteed outcomes. It needs a decision followed by movement. Another hook worth remembering is this: action is the cure for overthinking. The fastest way to silence doubt is to move. Movement replaces fear with feedback, and feedback builds competence. Competence builds confidence, not the other way around. When excuses die, responsibility takes their place. Responsibility sharpens focus. You stop blaming circumstances and start adjusting behavior. This shift is subtle but transformative. Instead of asking why something isn't working, you ask how to make it work. That single change turns obstacles into puzzles instead of stop signs. Execution feeds on that mindset. Excuses also drain energy. Every justification requires mental effort. Defending an action is exhausting. Execution, while demanding, is energizing because it creates progress. Progress fuels momentum, and momentum reduces resistance. That's why starting is always the hardest part. Once movement begins, the body and mind align behind the action. Here's a hook that exposes the real issue. Most people don't lack discipline, they lack follow-through. Follow-through is execution repeated. It's showing up after the excitement fades. It's continuing when no one is watching. Execution builds identity. Each completed action reinforces the belief that you are someone who finishes what they start. That belief becomes self-fulfilling. When excuses are present, failure feels personal. When execution becomes the focus, failure becomes data. You stop interpreting mistakes as proof of inadequacy and start using them as information. That shift accelerates growth. Execution creates learning loops that thinking alone never can. You don't need to be smarter, you need to be in motion. Another powerful truth is this: execution removes fear by replacing imagination with experience. Fear thrives in the unknown. Action turns the unknown into something concrete. Once something is concrete, it can be adjusted. You can't fix what you haven't started. Execution gives you something real to improve. Consistency in execution compounds. Small actions done daily outperform occasional bursts of intensity. Excuses interrupt that rhythm. When excuses die, rhythm forms. Rhythm builds systems. Systems produce results without requiring constant motivation. That's why high performers appear calm under pressure. They're operating from systems, not emotions. Execution also attracts clarity in unexpected ways. Resources appear. Opportunities surface. Support becomes visible. Not because the world suddenly changes, but because action makes you visible to solutions. Inaction hides you. Execution signals readiness. Even when you don't feel ready, there is a noticeable shift when execution becomes your default response. You stop asking permission from others and from yourself. You move first and adjust second. Progress replaces perfection as the goal. The weight of expectation lifts because you're no longer trying to get it right before you start. You're willing to get it right by starting. When excuses are gone, time stops being an enemy and becomes a tool. You use minutes intentionally instead of explaining why you don't have enough of them. Execution turns ordinary days into productive ones, and productive days into meaningful progress. That momentum doesn't announce itself loudly, but it changes everything. So let me close with this. Excuses will keep explaining your past, but discipline will create your future. Decide today that excuses are no longer welcome in your life. Fire them. Replace them with commitment, consistency, and courage. Because the truth is simple. When excuses die, greatness wakes up. And it's time for you to wake up.